Well, I'll start the recording. And I want to welcome you all to Co-Creator Circle. And I'd love to introduce Kiara to those who don't yet know him. Kiara describes himself as an avid science researcher. He explores the connections between galactic cycles, climate change, ancient history, quantum physics, systems theory, human behavior, and spiritual awakening. And if all of this seems that it's all just out in the universe, I can tell you he's also very grounded and is very much in touch with what's happening in the world today. And as an outcome of extensive research, he has come to the firm conviction that we stand collectively at the brink of a quantum evolutionary leap beyond our wildest dreams. So I'm really excited in seeing how you're going to be helping us to visualize with you and take the leap. Over
Mm.
to you, Kiara.
Thank you, Meenakshi. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today in this co-creation. So, I just feel like being here on this earth at this time, it's such a privilege, such a joy. And to be consciously present at this particular time in her evolution, there's so much going on so many levels, visibly and invisibly. Um, it's just, I feel just touched, ecstatic, and awed by what's going on. And so that's part of what I'd like to share from some of the perspectives that I've been exploring, and delighted to hear from all of you. Whatever um, responses come, whatever you've been feeling inside yourself, your own visions and dreams for what's to come. Primarily, I say that everything can be seen in terms of cycles. So, we think in terms of linear history, that time goes like an arrow in one direction. And that's when we are connected with the linear aspect of our mind. And that's a very tiny slice of reality. And beyond that, we are here as little pieces of the universe, um, to help create something that's never been seen before, in a way that's never been done before, to co-create something that uh, is beyond imagining. So as we are able to come in deeper and deeper and deeper into our own bodies, into the body of the earth, and come into connection with the earth as a living being, as a source consciousness, then it's like all the other aspects of ourself can start to drop in. Um, so I totally firmly believe that we're here on invitation. It's not just by chance that we happen to be here. It's not just random, haphazard, but it's like we're here on invitation from Mother Earth. Um, so when I talk about Gaia, I'm talking about a living consciousness, just like we are, with intelligence, with purpose, um, as a soul present in time and space, but also including aspects beyond time and space. Gaia's evolution is different from ours because um, human consciousness right now is focused more on the rational level of the mind, whereas Gaia's consciousness is elemental. So it's very multidimensional. She's not restricted to one dimension of reality. Um, Although, as cells within the body of Gaia, our job is to hold a certain perspective. Um, we are part of the nervous system of the earth, maybe the left brain of the earth. And so we have a role to play. And that helps her to move in the direction that she's planning. But she is a living consciousness, and there's an interaction. So Western civilization, actually, all of civilization today as we know it, has grown to experience ourselves as separate from the earth, separate from each other. Um, there's a there's a great sense of lostness from not experiencing a sense of purpose. We've forgotten who we are, and we've forgotten why we're here. We've forgotten that we are part of the earth. We're part of the living system that comprises Gaia. And some of you may be familiar with James Lovelock. So he's a British scientist, biologist, and he is the one who brought the Gaia hypothesis into the forefront. And what he means by this is that just like we, as human beings, um, are a multiplicity of different systems that are organized together. So we have a circulatory system, we have a nervous system, muscular, skeletal, all these different systems that work together to support our existence. So does Gaia. So she is a living system, alive and multidimensional. She has um, a multitude of bodies, just like we do. So we have physical bodies that are obvious to the physical senses. We have etheric bodies that bring um, a flood of different um, streams of awareness into our own human awareness. And we have mental, emotional, causal bodies, and Gaia does too. So, it's a mistake to think of her simply as a physical body of rock and soil, and then these species running around on top of her. It's so much more than that. And indigenous people everywhere, as you're all aware of, understood this. And because they understood this, they were able to relate to the earth in a different way, as part of the earth, interdimensionally, able to connect with the life force that runs through her body. So the rivers and the streams, the oceans and the lakes become part of the circulatory system of the earth, analogous to our own circulatory system. Um, so every system that we um, support in the human body are also analogous to systems within the earth. Every species has a role to play. Um, so even if species have become extinct, they still have a role to play because they still exist within the etheric body in the Akashic records. So part of what we're here is to reconnect with all the species that have ever lived on this earth. Um, if not on a physical level, on astral, etheric levels, because it's not complete without everything being simultaneously present. Um, as the nervous system of the earth, we have a very special role to play. Unfortunately, we've forgotten what that role is, and we've stepped into a kind of hierarchical model where we've trampled upon the earth, we've destroyed the earth, we've, acted out of balance, and that's affecting the evolution of this planet. But the time has come when that cannot be sustained anymore. So, this particular time, as we are transitioning between ages, between the Piscean age and the Aquarian age, between evolutionary cycles of different lengths. There's a 400-year cycle, there's a 2,000-year cycle, there's a 12,000-year cycle, and the Milankovitch cycles that govern ice ages and so on. There's galactic cycles where galactic energies from the center of a galaxy move through the entire Milky Way and touch the evolution of every solar system. There's solar cycles, there's a geomagnetic cycle. So there's so many different cycles that are converging right now as we shift from one world age to the other. And our role here is to play a co-creative part, um, not simply as invading organisms that have become a cancer on the face of the earth, but as co-creators in her evolution. So the more conscious we become, the more embodied we are, the more we can play that role. So what I'd like to do is maybe say a little bit about what these cycles are, where we're going, and who we are. Because if we can remember who we are in a multidimensional being, then we can bring ourselves here totally present with Gaia as part of this evolutionary journey. And that's what excites me more than anything else. It's like, yeah, we're here on such, we have so much to do um, on a scale that we can hardly imagine. Most of us have learned to feel separate and powerless. We feel like we are somehow victims of something that we cannot control, um, outside forces that are bigger than who we are. Um, but it's really the other way around. Who we are, if you imagine, most of the time we see ourselves as a tiny speck of dust in this vast big universe. Um, from another perspective, the entire universe is a tiny speck of dust inside of who we are. So it's just a matter of shifting our focus, and all of it is true. We are human, but we're also primordial consciousness that is an entire universe, that holds an entire universe. So if we can simultaneously maintain both aspects, the personal human self, and at the same time experience ourselves as a planetary being, a solar consciousness, a galactic self, and primordial consciousness beyond all time, space, effects, then we are empowered to actually play the role that we're designed to, which is, being the nervous system of the earth, which means to be vehicles that can connect across dimensions, bring information in from other galaxies, um, ride the waves of the universe. Because there are so many galactic species that are here right now, just so eager to interact with us as earth humans, so eager for us to remember who we are and not be in these tiny little boxes where we've forgotten um, the truth of what brings us here. So, so anytime along the way, if you have questions or if you want to, share some of your own experiences of all this, just say something in the chat or raise your hand and we can make this interactive. So it's not, this is a conversation. And I'm delighted that each of you can be part of this, bringing your own memories, your own awareness, and your own embodiment. Um, when I talk about embodiment, what I mean is that for a long time in many spiritual traditions, we focus more on the transcendence of spirit. So whether it's the Hindu tradition or the Judeo-Christian tradition, Buddhist, whatever, Islamic, there's this idea that we are somehow fragmented pieces of the whole. There's this idea that we're somehow separate from the universe and that we have to somehow live with this sense of isolation and fear, because if we feel separate from what's around us, we feel out of control and helpless. And then, in order to fit into this outer reality, we need to either manipulate that reality because we don't trust what's going on, or we live in fear and isolation. Um, and now the time has come and all that's ending, when we are being pushed into remembering. And this is necessary if we are to evolve to the next stage. Some of you may be familiar with the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. How many of you are familiar with them? Okay, yeah, Meenakshi. So um, their teaching is primarily to do with collective evolution. Yes, personal evolution is part of it, but it's not just, who we are individually as embodiments of the divine. It's really about an evolutionary journey that's much bigger than the personal self. Um, so what they say is that humanity is on a journey. We've been through many stages of evolution already. The first stages were more instinctive in nature. Um, then at the current level, we are focused more on the mind, rationality, reason, discrimination, the left brain functions. The next phase, which isn't here yet, but is slowly coming into manifestation, is the divine human, where the center of identity is not the mind, it's not our um, sense of personality based on memory, it's the soul. So it's a soul memory that spans many, many lifetimes, many, many dimensions from across the universe. So it's not just relegated to one planet in one solar system, one dimension of reality. The soul is so multidimensional. And if we start remembering that, as we start remembering that, then it opens up doorways. This is our next collective evolution as a species. And it's not just about spiritual awakening on a personal level, it's a collective awakening on a biological level. So, in other words, once we step into this new evolution, every single um, child that's born into this dimensional reality comes in with that full awareness, with those memories, with that DNA intact and active. Um, and the next evolution is as different from our current evolution as our current evolution is different from what's preceded us. So Sri Aurobindo and the Mother talk about what this next evolution is about, what this divine human is about, and then even beyond that. This next evolution is going on right now. We're going through a transitional period. And I'll say more about this because this is very soon. It's not, you know, hundreds of years in the future. It's happening right now. Um, and we can participate in this. That's what makes this so exciting. And then beyond this, there's what they call the Gnostic human or the supramental human, where that embodiment has taken place so deeply that our physical bodies are imbued with this divine consciousness, that source awareness. So we can directly travel in time and space just like consciousness does. There's no separation in time, there's no separation in space. And we have uh, identified with limitation to such an extent that we feel like we are trapped in one place, in one time, um, in one life, in one dimension, in one corner of the galaxy. And all that's about to change. So many of the galactic families that are here now, they're multidimensional. We can access them, we can see them, we can interact with them as we open up to that space within ourselves. So as we become more and more fifth dimensional, as we begin to remember who we are, as we begin to activate our DNA to its highest potential, then we step into that Gnostic human consciousness, where, like some of the ascended masters today, we can simply move in time and space instantly like that. We can feed our bodies directly on prana. We don't need to be nourished on food or external um, sources of light. Everything is inside. Working with inner technologies rather than the um, technologies that are so consuming of natural resources. So this is the next evolution. And if this was the final evolution, um, Gaia is in trouble, but we're not. Because humans are still in process of evolving further, and Gaia recognizes this. She is here to support us, like any mother. She is here to support us in this transition to the next species. She is here to support her own evolution in terms of um, something new that's emerging, that's not been seen before. Um, so that's like that's a preamble. So this is like the context for something that we can explore further. And if any of you have specific questions, please, list them so we can focus on that also. So I first began to explore the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. The mother was a French woman who settled in Pondicherry, became a spiritual partner for Sri Aurobindo. And their whole work was about bringing this consciousness, divine consciousness. They referred to this as supramental. And there's many, many levels of the mind beyond the rational mind. And the supermind is the highest of these. But bringing that through all the different bodies, the mental, the emotional, the etheric, and then finally into the physical body. And then through the physical body into the body of the earth. So this is a process of embodiment. And in 1956 was the first time, according to the mother, that this supramental force could be actually embodied within the consciousness of Gaia. And what that means essentially is that the supramental energy or supramental force is not fragmented in the way we imagine it. So, when we think of energy, there's limits to it. But the supramental force is not limited. When it's anchored in one body or through one body, it's connected with the entire planet. This is what quantum reality is. You understand the fractal nature, the holographic nature of all things, including matter. Matter is not separate from energy. Energy is not separate from consciousness. So when this supramental force enters into the body of the earth, it becomes available to all life, all evolution. And Gaia can then use that to consciously evolve further. So far, evolution has been a little bit haphazard. It's taken millions of years to get to a certain point. But now, because Gaia has chosen to include the human species as co-creators. I mean, this is such a huge gift that we are given to be co-creators in this next cycle of evolution. And what that means is that we can then also begin to anchor the supramental force through our own bodies to allow a deepening of this force in the body of the earth and speeding up the process of evolution. So, when Darwin referred to evolution, it was a very limited understanding of what evolution means. Survival of the fittest, natural selection, all those things. It's like experimental chance. Things, take millions of years to get to a certain point. But when it becomes conscious or co-creative, then it's active, powerful, and doesn't need to take time. And that's where we've come to now. Sri Aurobindo talks about a new cycle for the entire universe. It's like we're not just talking about one planet and one solar system and one galaxy. We're talking about evolution of an entire universe. And he says in previous cycles, what's happened is that there's been evolution and then devolution. There's been creation and then destruction. And when we go through these cycles right now, for instance, we have, on a human level, we have the potential to evolve further. We also have the potential to go into an extinction level event. But when the supramental force gets anchored more deeply, as it's happening, the possibility of destruction or the possibility of de-evolution vanishes. So then there's a continual spiral of forward movement. And we are in that movement now. So in previous ages, you've heard about the yugas, right? So you have 4 yugas, the Sat Yuga, which is the age of light, moving down into the Kali Yuga, which is an age of darkness. And it's a continual cycle, back and forth, light and dark. But now it's like it's time to move forward from light to light. Yes.
I saw that Danae had raised her hand. Maybe she wants to say something.
Yes, Danae? Oh, there's a message. I see it. Yeah. Can you speak to the biological experience of what you're describing?
You're describing it beautifully, and I know so many of us on this call are active leaders and teachers in our own version of what you're talking about. And I've rarely heard anyone discuss biologically, when we're talking about grounding that in the environment, biologically as a species, what are we looking at in terms of a transformation of our functioning? How does it actually look biologically, if you know?
Wow, beautiful. Yes. Yeah, this is what's exciting. Biologically, so this evolution is a biological evolution. And you're all familiar with Bruce Lipton when he talks about the biology of belief. And our belief systems, our conditioning, create certain configurations within our DNA. And then we get trapped within those subconscious configurations and limitations. And so only, we're using maybe 5%, 10% of our potential. And the rest of our DNA is kind of, dormant. So, when I talked earlier about the connection between the different bodies, so the physical body becomes an open channel for the etheric body, which becomes an open channel for the emotional, the mental, the causal bodies. Then all this information moves back and forth easily without being stuck somewhere in between. So the freedom that we experience from the higher levels of the mind can then permeate through the mental body, into the emotional body, through the etheric body, into the physical body, which then also affects our abilities and our senses. So our senses become much vaster, much more open, much more subtle. Instead of, say, for instance, our vision operating only in a certain frequency from that we call visible light, it becomes much vaster. We are able to perceive much more than a human vision. And many species actually are already experiencing that. The same thing with our sense of hearing. So rather than just being able to hear from 20 to 20,000 cycles per second, we get into much wider range. You look through the eyes of a butterfly, and it's a completely different world. You look through the eyes of a dog or an eagle or an ant or a caterpillar. It's a completely different world. So this is what shamans understand very well. They can actually place themselves into the body and consciousness of another species and experience the world very differently, looking very different. The sense of time changes. Humans have a sense of linear time, which becomes very limited in certain ways, because Gaia is not on Earth's time. Gaia has her own cycles, which are multidimensional. And when we learn how to operate in that way, our need for food, for instance, vanishes, because we're able to connect directly with the forces of light coming in through the etheric body. So our subtle bodies become open. So the nadis, the meridians, the kundalini channels are so open that we can dance with life directly. We can receive sustenance and nourishment from everything around us, from the sun, from the wind, from the stars, from communion with each other. Just being in a forest, receiving those vibrational elements, the elements of earth and fire, wind and water, and specifically plasma or ether, because this is where we go into quantum reality. The plasma is basically ionic particles. So once we enter that consciousness, that's the gateway where matter and energy dance together into the field of a single consciousness. So what happens then if you enter into that subatomic reality, and it's not just existing on a micro level anymore, this is a macro reality. And just like an atom moving from or an electron moving from one shell to the next instantaneously, there's no break in between. So we can move our bodies instantaneously from one location in time space to another. So if you want to be, in Hawaii in this moment, you're there. If you want to come to Goa and experience the sun and sand and warmth, you're there. It just takes intention, and you're there. If you want to go to Venus or the Pleiades, you're there. And this is actually literally how many galactic species are able to travel already. So it's nothing new. It's just that for Earth humans, because of the density of this particular dimension at this specific time in our history, because of our current evolution, we have created these self-imposed limits. So that's what I mean by a biological change. So it's a biological evolution. The next species, it's not just going to be a few people. Yes, there's a few people who are like the pioneers who open up the door. But then everybody who follows, from the moment they come into birth, have that capability. And even birth itself, and the mother says that in the next species, we will not need to be born in the way that we're born right now. We simply decide, okay, I want to be on this planet, and we show up there, we materialize. Or I'm tired of being on this planet, I want to go to Mars, and you're there. The truth is that this technology already exists, as you all know. The secret space program, they know how to send people out through these portals to other planet systems or even other star systems. It's just that, it's been manipulated and used for less than positive uses, but that's changing. but everything that has ever taken place before is in potential available to all of us collectively. So that's what makes this exciting. Yeah, you hear all these stories about masters and ascended beings who are able to do all these fancy things and manifest palaces from nothing, who don't need food and live in mountaintops and don't suffer from cold and heat and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, we look at them as stories. But what if you and I have that capacity inside us, but because we haven't turned on that DNA, because it's still dormant, we don't remember. How many of you have seen that movie Lucy? Anyone? Yeah, okay. So yeah, so in this movie, this woman, and I won't go into the whole story, but she learns how to activate dormant aspects of her DNA. And then suddenly it's like from 5%, 10%, and then 20%, 30%, and all the things that start to happen as she activates more and more of this DNA. So, from feeling really helpless and unworthy, suddenly she's feeling really confident and powerful. And then she has the capacity to access any information she needs directly from the Akashic worlds. Then she learns to link herself up energetically with realities around her, to transcend the limitations of the mind, eventually to become one with everything. And you see that, in the movie, it's like step by step. And it's violent, it's a Hollywood production, but it has that, that that teaching about what's possible. Um, does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I am so much of what you're saying. So I'm on the path with Paramahansa Yogananda. And before stepping into that path, I kept getting understanding. I kept questioning human birth. I'm like, what? Like, who came up with that? It was telling me, it's like, well, you're not going to be doing that in your next phase of species. That was just sort of a transition thing. And what you said is what I saw. So it's really fun. But I'm just always think about that we are part of the nervous system of Gaia, and our nervous systems are trained in particular ways, human beings. And so I often think about, I'll use the word voltage, the voltage of light of the Supreme, or the God consciousness, or whatever you want to call that, and how we as a species in our current stage of evolution there are many people who are already living in the way that you described. I'm not yet. Can our nervous systems in our current state of evolution as a mass body of humans hold that voltage? If we apply Bruce Lipton's teachings and say it's a matter of intent and mind, is it, or is it also there's an evolution in our neurology to be able to hold that frequency of light? So I'm very much about the biology of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate your thoughts.
I totally, are you familiar with what's his name? Peter. He wrote this book called The Global Brain. I forget his last name, Peter something. But what he says basically, and he's a biologist, what he says is that there's a magic number in evolution, which is about 10 to the power of 10, or 10 billion. So if you have, in the process of evolution, biologically, so when you have 10 to the power of 10, or 10 billion cells clumping together, and that's that, from a single cell organism, you have the functioning of a multi-cell organism. Then you have 10 to the power of 10 nerve cells clumping together, and you have a rudimentary nervous system. The next step up is the human brain. And the next step up, when you have approximately 10 billion humans on this planet, then the next level of evolution is the global brain. So functionally, we are close to that. Not only because we are close to that many individuals on this earth, but the internet is um, like a um, replica of the global brain. It's not the global brain. It's still an external um, um, idea, because we have to come outside of ourselves to engage with the internet. But what if all of that is inside us, and you start to understand that it's a holographic experience, and then it's like our human identity becomes a subset for global identity. So our primary identity then is no longer Kiara, human sitting here, and Dene, human sitting there, but we are both cells within Gaia. That's the global brain. So I feel like
Kiara,
this is, yes,
sorry,
Meenakshi.
I was just wondering, did he mean just just human beings or also other life forms? Or,
Every life
for
form, but
example, dolphins?
humans, yeah. Well, dolphins, I would say, dolphins, whales, all the cetaceans, they make up the right brain of Gaia, and humans make up the left brain of Gaia. So we represent together the nervous system of the planet. Other species represent other aspects of Gaia. So the rocks, the minerals, they represent the skeletal system. The plants represent the etheric body or the energy body. The animals represent the emotional body. Um, every species has a function, has a part to play in the awakening of Gaia and in the evolution of Gaia. And because we've lost so many species, it's also then our responsibility to open to whatever that species represents in our own internal systems. So, I mean, this is the shamanic world. We are stepping into how we can actually experience the world, not just through our human perception, but opening to the upper worlds, the lower worlds, multidimensional realities, and engaging with Gaia from that perspective. So this is becoming more and more, I mean, so many people are waking up spontaneously to these realities. And there's one other aspect of this. So I spoke about, the fact that we are very, very close now to a collective shift as we move from one age to another age. What is the trigger for this? One of the triggers um, is what scientists call a geomagnetic reversal. It's different from a pole shift. When people talk about a pole shift, they're really talking about a geographical pole shift. But here we're talking about the magnetic poles, and it's already shifting. So if you look at the direction of the north and south polarity, the North Pole has started to move more towards Siberia. The South Pole is starting to move in this opposite direction. So it's not like a directly opposite. South is not opposite North anymore. They're both moving in different directions, somewhere towards Bali. Um, so when the poles reach a certain point, so it's like when the North Pole reaches 40 degrees latitude, then the magnetic field of the Earth starts to collapse very, very rapidly. It's already happening. In the last 200 years, the magnetic field has collapsed maybe 20% of its original field strength. But when we cross that latitude, things happen very, very quickly. Eventually, what happens is that there's a complete collapse of the Earth's magnetic field, and then a reorientation and a new polarity. And some indigenous people have referred to this as the 3 days of darkness. It's a very, very short period of time, It's literally 3 days or a few hours. But what happens during this time is that our orientation with our etheric, or between the physical body, etheric, emotional, mental, and causal bodies also starts to break apart. And who we are is a conglomerate of all these different bodies, right? So what happens if your physical body was separated from the etheric body, or the etheric body was separate from the emotional body or the mental body? There would be a sense of complete disintegration of our personal self. And this then activates. So every time that the magnetic field collapses, it activates something called DMT within the pineal gland. The same thing happens when the physical body dies. So at the moment of physical death, the heart stops. The heart is the physical center for the Merkaba, which is the geometry which connects all these bodies together. And when the heart stops, the Merkaba breaks down, and that activates pineal gland, DMT, and that then becomes a doorway through which the soul disconnects with the physical and etheric body and moves out into the mental and emotional bodies, of which we call the astral bodies, and then finally into the causal body, which is the realm of the soul. So this is a natural movement. So imagine what happens when the collective magnetic field of the earth collapses. It means that for all of us, collectively, we enter this moment of time where our personal identity dissolves, where we drop our sense of personal self, and we actually enter a state of coma, literally, where what we primarily identify with at that point is the soul. It's like that's the moment of embodiment where soul consciousness can reconnect beyond this matrix that we understand today. So in that moment of magnetic reversal, our current matrix dissolves and the soul matrix begins to take its place. I don't think it's possible for us to really imagine what that would look like from our current level of consciousness.
I think that that is imaginable, that I have not just imagined, I have experienced that a number of times. And I've experienced with other souls who are at a level of complete awareness and coming together. It was almost like we were both hit with something. And that was almost a small example of what will happen on a large scale. Right. And looking at each other and going, and there was so much more, but it's the same sort of thing, that if we have reached a certain state, we can sense that and see that, because we are not from here. We are from another space. I mean, it's only my feeling. But.
Beautiful. I mean, and imagine if every single human is able to activate their DMT at the same time. It's like everyone on ayahuasca. So it's like, how many of you have had experiences with plant medicines or psychedelics? Okay. Yeah, so imagine, and what happens when you're connecting with those shamanic realms is that your identity is no longer limited to the personal self. You begin to experience all of that outside of you as part of you. There's no inside and outside. There's no separation. And then imagine if that becomes the experience of every single human being on this earth. Many will not be able to hold that in their physical body, which means there's some that might leave the body, and that's okay. They just come back in a different incarnation where they can be more present in the, bring more of themselves into the physical form. But those who remain and those who can hold that higher self as part of their personal reality, then we become the midwives for the next evolution of Gaia.
Why you'll see suddenly Danae and me laughing a little louder is because on every new moon we have a midwives for Gaia. Danae had that
Oh,
vision a few, maybe a year back, that we need to have this regular sessions, midwives for Gaia.
Oh, great. Great. Well, there's a couple other, Rainbow.
Hi. So I really resonate with everything that you say, and part of lots of different groups, and I hold shamanic space myself, and but I'm also a single mum and a scholar, and the challenge for me really, we talked before about transcendence, this idea of spiritual bypassing, and a lot of spiritual narcissism in the West, where we're starved of indigenous community, we're starved of family and friends and a culture, a close community around us, a tribe that understand the same as we do, that have the same perceptions as we do, that have learned all this. And so, there's so many imminent problems, and I find like the recent scholarship emerging in the fourth wave of feminism is talking about the difference between male and female bodies and how females experience spirituality as imminence. It's not some transcendental reality. It's actually a deep connection with Gaia. And becoming a mother really amplified my sense of imminent concern, for the global crisis that we're going through right now. And we talk about, dolphins and the other species, but did you know that there's only 4% of the biomass that are actually wild animals left on the planet, 30% humans, and the rest is agriculturally farmed animals? So there's so many problems and so much ignorance to these truths. How do we make this more embodied, not just as an individual with a spiritual quest, or as a shamaness, or as a teacher? How do we make this a lived reality? I have a lot of clients who work with me to integrate the teachings from psychedelic realms, and it's really grounded stuff, like working on the wounds of their inner child, whether rejecting love, or how they can bring in more of these multidimensional realities, like communicate with the female lineages that are there to care for them, because we're so missing on this like good mother archetype in society, especially in the West, with this deep patriarchy, dominator culture, politicians that we don't trust. We've also got so many wounds, and these figures of like children not getting breastfed, like past 6 months. 1% of children in the UK get breastfed past 6 months, and we pacify the kids now, not just with bottles and dummies, but with technology. So as a mother, I try and radically ritualize my son's life and embed in him these ideas that he is a spirit, he is a multidimensional being, and we work with herbal medicine, crystals, we work with the fae in the woods when we go walking. But I feel like I'm privileged because I've got a lot of education in these things and a lot of experience. There's a lot of my friends who are spiritual mums who have no idea, and their kids are just literally watching TV all day because the mums are so overwhelmed with so much stuff to do, with hardly any money, like shamed in society, like mothers and children are really on the outside. So it's great to sit in circles like this and talk about the potential and wonder about what's going to happen on this planet over the next couple of 100 years. But what about right now? What about the next decade? Have you got any reflections on that? I know we can start to really work with the children the toddlers, the babies right now on this planet to, you know, to really bed this stuff in. Because I notice a lot of scholars are talking about reforming education, making education more transpersonal, integrating spiritual theses into, you know, really young kids in the schools. But my son's two, only two, and he hasn't been to any of these educational institutions yet. So much is on me as mother. So much is on me as mother, and there's no support, no resources, you know, nothing. So how do we make it more grounded now? How do we really start to serve now, wherever we're at as our development? You know, and how do we invite in those people that are still greedy, that are still wanting to capitalize off trauma? You know, that's really where I want to start looking at being a game changer. And for me, that's a massive part of helping Gaia evolve.
Wow, thank you. Well, what I see happening, and the last 2 years with this whole COVIDian drama, what I see is that people are becoming more and more aware of what's real. You know, the illusions are easy to see. And as we are awakening more and more, people are recognizing that we've lived in a world of illusion. It doesn't feed us anymore. The educational system doesn't feed us anymore. It doesn't feed children anymore. You know, the old parenting styles don't feed us anymore. So people are choosing to step away from the mainstream, start finding communities where they can find other people, live co-creatively with each other, with the land, in direct relationship with Gaia, raising children in ways that honor them as souls, releasing our conditioning around limitations. We get stepping away from the vibrational structures of society where we've forgotten. And the only way we can do this currently is by stepping out and creating new communities, and maybe first dimensional communities, visioning them, but also at the same time, you know, learning the distinction between truth and falsehood. For many people, they haven't learned to distinguish. It's like our sense of discernment is such that we buy everything we're told. And with this whole COVIDian crisis, I think one thing that's happening is we are recognizing that we need to look deeper within ourselves to find truth. And then once that starts happening, then what does it mean to live that truth? So as a mother, you have certain, responsibilities to your children. As humans, we have a certain responsibility to the earth and other species. What does that mean? You know, we are addicted to certain technologies which consume rather than replenish the earth. What does that mean? What replaces that? And I think what we're learning slowly as we awaken more and more of who we are biologically is that these new technologies start to emerge, not just outside of us, but inside of us. So, you know, we learn what it takes. Okay, if it means that we step away from normal society, if you feel called to, and nourish yourself directly on light, on prana. These are very much possible. I know so many people who've learned how to do that. Nourish your body directly on prana, through the sun, through the wind, by connecting with the forces of life and love all around us, by engaging and becoming more and more present. That's what embodiment means for me. And this is also what so many visionaries have seen as part of the next human evolution. So if we can just envision it, even that is helping to anchor it slowly. And it's never at this stage going to be everybody coming on the same page and going off grid or learning to respect the earth or each other in the way that we can, envision within from a soul perspective. But it's not necessary. It takes a very few people, as long as it's you've heard of David Hawkins and the scale of consciousness. It's, on that scale, if the average consciousness is somewhere like 200 on the scale, 0 to 1000, all it takes is a few people vibrating at 300 to start to counteract those who are stuck on separatist consciousness. And the higher up you go on the scale, you're able to affect, there's like a ripple effect that goes out collectively. And you start changing things because of something that you are awakening to inside yourself. So, it's going to be a struggle at first, Rainbow. And I know many of us are struggling with the last 2 years have been so crazy for so many people. And a lot of it has been painful. It's like you see the madness all around, and you know that it's madness, you know that it's illusion. And you see so many people caught up in that. Like this one psychologist that, what's his name? Dieter somebody, can't think of his name, Detmar somebody. But he talks about what mass formation psychosis. And when people are lonely enough and people are fearful enough, they'll buy anything they're told. And then, the herd will follow that. And there's a few of us, maybe 30% of the global population, that's stepping away from that mass formation. And we become the pioneers. And we follow the heart, we follow the soul, we follow an inner vision that beats to a different rhythm. And slowly that builds up. So this time is not easy, but if we can hold the big picture, I think what's happening is that more and more embodiment is taking place. And it's not something that can be explained through the rational mind. If you try and do that, then it's too easy to get into a place of hopelessness or fear. But if we can let go of that need to understand everything and just follow that inner knowing, something is changing. Look what's happening in the UK right now. It's all those restrictions and lockdowns and mandates. They're gone so suddenly because we've crossed that threshold of the critical mass. And now that's happening all over the world. It's like dominoes falling. What's happening in Canada, what's happening in a dozen countries in Europe. And by the end of, this month, next month, I think that whole drama will be over. And what happens next? Those who've been able to touch a higher vision, a higher state of embodiment, will find that everything that they need to do is provided. They'll know where to go. There's a new system of guidance that is being activated, where we find each other without trying to. It just happens. We are told where to go and what to do, not from a place of mind, but from a place of soul. And it just happens. So far, because we've been so conditioned by the rational mind, we found that it's really difficult to follow a vision, to find a place in the world. Many of us have felt really lost in this reality. But this transition is happening now. When I spoke earlier about this magnetic reversal and crossing that 40-degree north latitude, when does that happen? according to some scientists, March of next year, 2023, we should be crossing that mark. And so things are happening now, and there's an acceleration of this embodiment process. So this time period is transitional, and we're learning to be alchemists, and this is how it's happening. And I really, really sense that as we go through this moment of crisis, every time there's a crisis, it's a gateway to the next level of evolution. And evolution doesn't happen without a crisis. I mean, that's part of how nature works. So this crisis is what we've been experiencing now. But for Gaia, it's not a crisis, it's a doorway. And we are the midwives through this doorway. And each of us will have a different part to play in this awakening. And trusting ourselves, trusting each other, trusting Gaia is what it takes. And too many of us have been locked into fear. Too many of us have gone into mistrust and a sense of hopelessness. And that's changing. You know, I see this changing so quickly. And for me, that's important to, you know, what some of these visionaries have been seeing and what all of us are experiencing in our dreams and our, you know, higher visions. That there is a purpose, there is a movement, and there is an end to the current system. There is a new species emerging, and is biologically different from anything we've known so far. It's directly connected. We are directly connected to soul consciousness. We are, in fact, soul consciousness. And then once we are guided from that level of being, from that center of identity, things can change so quickly. It's like anything we imagine, anything we can vision becomes real immediately. You know, so we're not locked in time. So, you know, we have to use words to express this. But I think for many of us, it's not just an idea, it's a felt sense. It's a knowing. It's a deep knowing and resonance that we're experiencing in each other, in ourselves, on the earth. And so times like this, when we're able to connect with each other and share this vision, there's like an awakening of something inside us that we can feel. Yeah.
Kiara, because I remember you'd said you wanted this to be also, you've been asking us to interact, and I'm sensing a lot that the wise mothers in this group want to share, because Rainbow Goddess, what you asked really, I think has you know, it's sort of tuned something in each of our hearts. Some of us have got children and grandchildren, and I love what Kiara has shared so far. You know, about do you feel that your question is answered? Do the mothers here feel that they have said what they wanted to say in the chat, or would you all like to say something else? And if you would, I think we could give each one maybe 2 minutes, so that because then we can continue.
Because
Absolutely.
for me, the focus really is like in the scholarship, just for example, because there's so many fingers that I've got in all different pies around this. But what's emerging now is that motherhood is in crisis. Motherhood is a spiritual crisis at the moment. And there's just emerging is this idea that motherhood is a spiritual emergency. So mothers go through this massive vision quest of birthing a new child onto this planet, and they feel all of this intuitive way, but there's because they're not in a village, you know, and we're not doing it around with our communities around us. We're doing it all on our own. There's so much demand that we can't tend to our babies, and so mother guilt is becoming a pathology now in women, and the figures are so far-reaching because no one's really getting hold of it yet. It's all to do with clinical agencies, not spiritual schools of thought yet. That's just emerging now. but it ranges from 14% to 75% having a pathology, ranging from slight guilt all the way up to maternal suicide. And so we've recently invented a law, the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act, and women aren't just killing themselves, they're also killing the children. And so if we are to really help everything evolve and align with these truths and support Gaia, for me, it's all about supporting the mothers and bringing them back into the center again and realizing that sleep deprivation isn't just a form of torture, it's like psychosis, and that woman's dealing with that daily, sometimes for years. Like, my son's 2 now, and he still hasn't slept through the night. And sometimes I literally want to pull my skin off. And so then am I going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do a puja to White Tara and pray? Am I heck? I'm just going to have a day like pulling my hair out. So it's another day of evolution wasted. And then because I'm so spiritually aligned, feeling the guilt and the pressure of that as well to mother society, not just mother my son, but mother society. So like, you've got all these people like yourself who aren't mothers. You know, have you noticed that Krishna, Jesus, none of them were women? You don't get any gurus that are like mums of children giving all this because we're doing the mothering.
Well,
So
to
like our
interrupt you,
kids
not
have to
meaning to
know it.
interrupt you, Rainbow Goddess, but then let's hear from some of them who are here in this circle right now, if you would like to. We can maybe give each one, a few minutes to speak if you want. Kiara,
I
does this
understand
seem what you would like?
totally. And
Okay.
misunderstood, not just guilt, misunderstood.
Okay. Dene wanted to say something. Is that okay, Kiara?
Oh, please, yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is exactly what
It's well,
is needed now.
so I'll keep it as brief as I can. So first of all, I bow at your feet and I honor you, Rainbow Goddess, because I understand. I was a single mom. I did that. I went through it, and there were days I didn't think I was going to make it. Right, and that sitting in the corner in fetal position, crying and pulling your hair out, is so very primitive for us to allow ourselves without judgment to have that experience, because that's the guilt and anguish passing through. But it isn't who you are. And I know that you know that. What Spirit kept telling me was, you are the foundation of pure love, and all the emotionality that's moving is real and vivid for you in the feminine. Your job is to anchor that pure beingness in yourself all the time, and don't limit yourself. So what I had to learn to do was take the experience that it sounds like you're having. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm overwhelmed, I'm a single provider, I've got clients, I've got a kid, I'm not sleeping, all of it, and turn it over and make it, I am the creator of the reality that I live in. I'm done with that. And I had to reach deep into my bones and deep into the galactic heart of Gaia, pull that into my body and completely turn around the experience I was having, and created groups of women in my position with common age children who were all experiencing the same tremendous ego death. And together as the feminine, we anchored and grounded into form in our lived experience, a tribe and a village, whether we did it virtually or in person. I had both. And we made sure that we pulled in the collective power of us as divine feminine in a literal, tangible, practical way. So we all got nourished and we all got fed and we all got held, and so did our kids. And what ended up happening was those little beings that have come in, they, you know this, he chose you on purpose. You know, there's he could have chosen some unconscious, still asleep, whatever woman in a story who wasn't awake yet. You're totally awake. You're plugged in. You're a leader. You're a teacher. He chose you. And I'm just being passionate right now. He's bringing his mastery to you. He's actually your teacher. You know all this already. But for you to stand and mirror to him, I've got you and I've got me and we're doing this, and pull out of the personality suffering of the single mama, which seems impossible to do. It seems impossible. It's very convincing. You can do it. You have the capacity to do it and to generate a circle of women and toddlers around you that mirror that mastery that you have. This is my strongest feeling as I watch you and see you and hear you. It's like, no, you're unstoppable. I understand your anguish and your pain. Don't believe it. Experience it. Let it pass through you. Don't let that limit you. You are so much more than that.
And that's beautiful, Danae, and
Mm.
Rainbow Goddess, because my child is now, 30. I can tell you that even these were the indigos who had come in. It was so difficult, and people like Tavita, I had to go to Tavita for something. And she explained to me this exactly what you said, Kiara, that you can absorb all the food and nourishment. We as mothers have been given all the wrong teaching from whatever we've been taught. The child must have 8 ounces. They must
Mm.
sleep. You must sleep. They must do. We've been given too many musts. All you have to do, this is so beautiful. Sleep when you have to. When your child wakes you up, let him sleep with you and do many, many things which are so natural and which you
Mm.
will feel is right for you. The child just needs to feel close because he's been inside you and his physical human form. And this my husband had to teach me because I didn't have this human mother instinct. He said this child has been inside you for so many weeks. Now you expect that because Dr. Spock or someone's telling you that at this
Mm.
age they should be in another bed, that's the correct thing to do. No, let him be close to you. That's when, and it was so easy after that. Stop the
Mm.
musts, even to you. You don't have to pray, you don't have to do anything. Your greatest prayer is just to be with your child. Just
Mm.
enjoy him. And when you're angry, like Danae said, or you're feeling whatever you're feeling, feel it. And I can tell you today, my children, they've been raised up with me, everyone telling me I don't know how to raise children, I don't know how to be strict. I would never let them go to school if they didn't want to. I let them do whatever they wanted. And my children are successful human beings. They're in their 20s and 30s, and they think I'm the best mother in the world when I hardly did anything. I just let them be.
Mm. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, wow.
You're happy now. White Feather wanted to
Well,
say something.
yeah.
White Feather, go ahead. I know that Kiara may not be able to see all of us, but you're muted right now.
Okay. My daughter was not a baby daughter, a baby person. And God put me there. I was living in Colorado and my mom had surgery and then she said she was pregnant. So I was put there and I took care of him for his first 2.5 years. And I slept with him on my chest. He had to be bounced all the time. I started doing infant massage and that changed him instantly. So if you can get a hold of the tape of them doing infant massage, because there's a certain way to do it. He was not born through the canal. He was cesarean. So he didn't get his left and right brain through the canal hooked.
Mm.
And so I did infant massage. It changed him to a calm, peaceful child. It was amazing. And I mean, we used to sit in and I'd hold his hands and I'd say, think of something good or, sort of to prepare him for meditation or something like that, where he could go inside and take care of himself. And I just can't say enough about how much it changed him. The infant massage is so important, especially if they were cesarean and didn't get that through the canal. But they need to be touched and loved and caressed, and they don't have to be on a schedule. Because my mom kept saying, you need to put her on a schedule. She was fine. They're fine without having to be on a schedule. But I just wanted to let you know how drastic he changed being massaged and his body being brought back into alignment. So I understand you because I worked with him and he had to be bounced all the time, walking up and down the stairs. And so there are things that you can do. And if you have to, call me or whatever. And he would come to me and he said, Unchi, when I was little and you used to say, think about this or tell me what's happening in my mind and stuff. He goes, I was just making it up. And I said, I know, but that's how you learn. I said, that's how you learn how to do that. And now He takes care of special needs, kinder and pre-kinder children, and he loves it. And so it just centered him to this world. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Beautiful. Jitika, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, so I can resonate with all the moms here. And yeah, I raised my daughter the same way Meenakshi just shared, that I was never strict. And, you know, everyone in my family, they say I'm not a good mom because I'm not strict, or I don't let her, you know, I don't have restrictions or something like that. But you know, we celebrate before her exams. I take her out and we celebrate before her exams, and I tell her, we are celebrating your success. That is how you manifest your success. Before your exams, you celebrate your success, and you don't have to just worry about anything, because you have already celebrated your success. So, you know, I've never pushed her for anything or restricted her for anything. She's now 18 and she's studying in Canada, far from me. But she says, you know, she says, Mama, I miss living with you because you let me be. And you know, I've always, you know, was very free with her. She's like, it's an amazing relationship with her. And I have all my I read somewhere in a parenting book that when a child is born, it's the parents' learning time starts. So, you know, I took everything as my learning, because my emotions were getting triggered with anything, or my anger, or I got impatient, or I got restless. They were all my emotions which were triggered. So it was my learning time. I had to learn, that was not something which I have to make her learn. Yeah, that's all.
Mm,
Thank
mm.
you.
Thank you. Yeah. Vivian.
I am sorry. I kept searching, but I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand except to do this. So thank you all. You have shared some really wonderful stories. And so I just wanted to share a couple of things. In my early 30s, which is a long time ago, I read a book, Emmanuel, by a soul who was channeled by Pat Rodegast. So it's a book that's been around for a long time. It's a book of prose, and I spent a lot of time away from my son because of work and other commitments, and but I worried about him a lot. And so one of the messages that has stuck with me for many years was a line from that book that very simply said, trust the wisdom of his soul. And having that trust, I mean, that was just a small statement that really expanded quite a bit since that time into trusting in the wisdom of your own soul, trusting in the wisdom of the divine and beyond. And that has served me well in raising my child, who's now a grown man, quite independent and doing well. And like all of you, I'm very proud of my son. So that's one thing I wanted to share. The other thing is that we are given challenges, whether we can see this or not. We're given challenges. And the challenges are to help raise our consciousness, or, whatever. There are a variety of purposes for this. But one purpose is a challenge of getting through the old operating rules, the operating rules of the third dimension, which obviously are crumbling and being changed. We're going to shift to a new set of operating rules when we move into a higher range of vibrational frequencies. But for now, we're challenged by what's happening here. And just understand that we're given challenges to inspire that creativity within us. In other words, we're here to heal that. And so we have an opportunity here to not focus necessarily on what's wrong, but just for the sake of observing how the old operating rules are, but to kind of shift our attention to how can we heal this? How can we replace it or transform it to something that is more aligned with the energy that I'm carrying, or the energy, higher vibrational frequency of where we're going to next. So the moral of that short story is shifting our perspective away from what's wrong with something to what's right, and to inspire ourselves creatively to come up with that solution. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Well, I'm so touched by all of you and your words and your power, your passion, your wisdom. This is really what we are offering and sharing with each other that helps us, each one of us, to transcend the current system, the current density of where we've landed. As you're all talking about motherhood, what comes up for me, this is what Gaia is also experiencing. The same angst that we're experiencing in terms of our children. I'm not I don't have children, but I can listen to each one of you and hear what you're saying from that space of being mothers. It's the same place that Gaia is going through, not knowing if is going to be exactly what she's envisioning, the way that we've cut her down and tied her up in so many ways. And, it's odd to think about this, but in some ways, she's dependent on us. Because, as a free being, she has intentionally tied herself down to a species that she has brought into being. And if you're not able to follow her lead, we're holding her back. And, this is what every mother goes through, right? So the sense that, am I able to raise my child in the way that I would like? Can I break with all the conditioning and limitation of the world around me to be free to do what I feel to do, what my child is calling from a soul space? That's the challenge. So when we talk about being midwives, I think it's like it's also entering into the heart of Gaia. As a mother, that's what you're doing. You're entering into your own heart, feeling the angst, feeling the passion, feeling sometimes the resistance, and knowing that there's no other choice. You have to, however difficult that is, there's no other way. And I think that's where, if we choose to be midwives with the earth, with Gaia, that's what's required of us also. We have to be part of this awakening. There's no other way. There's no other purpose. There's no other reason we're here, however difficult it might seem. And that's where we need each other. That's why this call, this conference call, where we can touch each other's hearts and spirits, is so important. We cannot do this alone, because we don't even know what that means. We don't even know where we're going. So really honor each one of you for, the depth and the passion that you bring to this conversation. Thank you. And I feel, as a male, I'm the only male in this group. I feel like our job as men in this world is to support the birthing that's taking place. We cannot be mothers directly, but we can be midwives supporting those who are mothers to go where we need to go. We know where we need to go, but we sometimes don't allow ourselves that privilege because of our fear. So as protectors, as warriors, our job as men is to hold space, so that all of us together can be midwives. And the mothers know the way. You have the power within you. You look at a mountain lion, and how they are able to protect the young, no matter what. Any species knows how to do that. It means being totally, absolutely selfless and learning what that means, and then supporting, encouraging each other. So thank you for, encouraging each other to do that. Thank you for being so honest with what that means for you. This is what it takes. Thank you.
Yeah, Kiara, that's what I was going to ask you, because in all our co-creator circles, in all different circles, meditation, so many things that we have, we see so many women waking up and being a part, forming that community. And like you said, one man. So often there's one man, or sometimes, of course, no women. Like whenever I have a circle, I never call it a women's circle, but very often it is a women's circle. Of course, all of us have got our divine masculine and feminine. I wonder whether there's anything about that that you want to share about the genders. Uh, because one of the feelings that I'd had once, so I'm just running it with you, is that each of us is actually, we've only known two genders, and now we are saying many other genders in the world. We've only called ourselves men and women. But many of us have never really felt as if we're just the typical man or the typical woman, I don't think most people are typical, actually. I think all of us are in a percentage where gender is concerned. Do you have any feelings about that as Gaia is evolving? I think even of Gaia as actually genderless as much as the soul. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I know it's like, if we identify with ourselves as human, then we tend to identify with man, woman, gender roles. But if you go beyond that human identification, those roles fall away. I don't see myself as a man. I don't see myself even as a human. What am I? Presence, embodiment of presence. And I don't need to know more than that, in order to be present here on this earth. And I don't think it matters if you're identified with a particular gender. You're not that gender. What I find so hilarious in the United States right now is, I don't know how many gender roles there are, 70 different, it's like, oh my God, it used to be just men and women, right? Now it's like LBGTQ and 50 other variations of that. And it's like, who has the time to sift through all that? You're not any of it.
Really? No.
And, you know, by trying to, this is all a divide and conquer strategy. And what we need to learn is we are not any of it. I'm not human. And Gaia, you know, we try and put her into a box also, and she's not any of that. We cannot understand what she is, or, you know, we call it Mother Earth, Gaia, Goddess. That's from our perspective as human. We try and relate to other animals from our perspective as human. They don't see themselves as an animal. They don't see themselves as whatever that species is. I had the privilege of spending a lot of time with dolphins in different parts of the world. And what I got very quickly is that they don't perceive themselves as dolphins. They just are. And it's when I could drop my human identity that I could actually begin to communicate with them. And that's what we're called to, you know, dropping the identities, dropping the roles, then identifying with presence. And that presence, when we can identify with that, is always sufficient, no matter what the challenges we're given. So this is an evolutionary crisis. It's not a social, political, educational, whatever, you know, systems we pretend are outside of us. This is an evolutionary crisis. And it's everything that we're experiencing is part of this. And the Great Mother, Gaia, Shakti, it's all, you know, an aspect of this. And one thing about the Vedic tradition, which I like, you know, when they talk about Shiva and Shakti, masculine, divine feminine, they're not separate from each other. You cannot have one without the other. They're part, you know, they're two faces of the same coin. So even the attempt to create gender identity is a mistake. So I think what's happening more and more is like we're letting go of these outer identities and roles and finding our passion in our power. And that's what I hear from the group.
Yeah, Claudia wants to say something.
Hi, Kiara. Kiara?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. It's very nice to see you again. Here in Italy, we have a very bad time. But I think we will manage. For me, it's strange because I live in this situation, but I feel I'm not living in this situation. It's like being in a circle, but at the same time, I feel out of the circle. I don't know how to explain that. Can you get what I'm meaning?
We couldn't hear you in the middle.
Yet out.
Sorry?
Okay, now it's easier to hear you. There was a point where your voice was fading. So you're saying you feel in the circle and yet out of the circle, and that's that feels disconnected.
Yes, I know I am in this situation.
Yeah.
But the sensation is not to be in the situation, you know? because for me it's like a dream. It's like a dream. I feel that is not real, you know, like to be in two different dimensions.
So you're talking about the lockdowns and all the COVID vaccine,
yeah, all the situation, you
mandates and
know.
all that, yeah.
The people here is like something like out of mind, you know. And I don't know, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's okay.
Yeah. Can I share a perspective with you?
Yeah.
About all this, what's happening in the last 2 years? Astrologically speaking, this moment in time, the last 2-3 years, is like a reflection of what was going on in 1914, leading up to the First World War. The 2 wars that we went through in the last century were times of extreme crisis on the one hand, but also very powerful awakenings. It's like things that had been buried so deep in the collective unconscious were being forced up to the surface. And that's necessary, even though it's painful. So right now, this is a repeat of that cycle, but in a much more gentle and graceful way, even though it feels really crazy and stupid. What it's doing is bringing up things to the surface that need to be seen so we can wake up. So Sri Aurobindo talked about the supramental descent, which is this unified light entering into the heart of matter. But he said this would be followed by what he called supramental catastrophe. What that means is if there's a force of harmonization that's present. So even though there's oppositions, even though there's chaos, it's not as bad as it would have been without this force of harmonization. That's part of this evolution. So there's a divinity, there's a grace entering into this movement of evolution now, which wasn't there before. So imagine we could have been in World War III right now. That was an option. That there is a timeline where we would be, where we could be half destroyed in a nuclear war, or where there could be massive earthquakes and volcanic activity and earth changes, where it's not just a few thousand or 100,000 people who are dying or suffering, but an entire planet being destroyed. That's not happening. So that perspective sometimes can be important. So even though there's what appears to be really crazy, mad, and dismal, if we know that this could have been much worse, it gives us a sense of balance. And then we can find our hope again. And then we can find a purpose again. And we need to hold on to that in order to gracefully allow ourselves to be part of Gaia's evolution.
Tree has asked a question in the chat.
I was just
Go
thinking
ahead.
that the eighth fire, it just sounds like you're familiar with that? The 7 fires of the Native Americans, and we're in the 8th fire now, and then we're at that choice. Is that basically what you're saying?
Say more about that.
I'm not very.
So what is this 8th fire?
I'd have to probably be easier if I just read something about it or send something.
Okay, sure, sure.
Yeah, it's the teachings of the Native Americans, the Algonquin teachings of the 7 prophets and the 7 fires. And there's a walk across, well, there's many walks, I'm sure, but you know, leading into this 8th fire, I'm sure, guess you're not familiar with Ojibwe and the natives and their teachings.
I'm not familiar with the 7 fires. I'm familiar with the Ojibwe people and some of their teachings, but not this.
So
So
I want to get the exact wording. You can talk about something else, and I'll put it in the chat when I can find it.
Okay, all right. Well, what that reminds me is what some of the prophecies have been about the 7th universe. That now we're actually, or we've gone through 6 universes, and we're entering the 7th universe, and it's going to be as different, very, very different from the universes that have preceded this. So what's going on this planet right now is opening a door for something new to emerge across the entire physical universe. So, you know, it's a big event, but we're not there yet. And so what we're seeing is from one side of this journey, and we don't get to actually see the full picture until we are on the other side. And that's why sometimes we feel a little bit lost. And that's part of what happens. You know, the caterpillar feels lost as it goes into the cocoon because it doesn't see what's on the other side. Once we get through the cocooning, then we recognize, oh yeah, we had to go through this. Now we know why. Now we know, you know, why we're here. Okay, here, the 8th fire details a Native American prophecy of a time when humankind will come to a fork in the road. At this point, people will be able to choose a path of materialism and destruction or a path of spirit and awakening. Yeah, there's a Hopi prophecy also that's similar to this, that we have a fork in the road and we choose one or the other, and we are at that moment.
Is this
of
where
choice.
you think we are now? Is that what you were kind of implying with that, or no?
I think we're actually past that point.
Okay.
We have already chosen, and we have chosen collectively, even though it's invisible for the most part. We have actually made that choice already to take a path of ascension. And
I guess my next question would be, we're talking about male and female, and I know I could go into the religious paradigms and how God was male, and now God is becoming male and female, and I'm wondering if we're all becoming male and female, but that's another probably story. But where was I going with this? Jesus. Yeah, there was something. It was a whole different topic. Just give me a minute, and if I remember,
Yeah.
I'll.
In the meanwhile, White Feather has raised her hand.
Yeah, I was just, you know, we all have a little bit of a different take on where it's going and that kind of thing. And the information that I'm getting from different sources, there's a little gal that is from the Hopi lineage, Addie Lamborn, who is being instructed through the native people that are in spirit world. They're guiding her. And they gave her these 33 codes, and they discuss it. And it's very good. When I got her and knew, because I have been on the Hopi reservation, and the Hopis are and the first thing I saw were whales in the sky, in the clouds, and the whales have ancient memory, hold our memory. And so I knew that this, what she had was good, you know, that they were bringing forth good information. And there's a lot of people coming forth with different things like that. And I just feel like I guess my hope is that we shift quicker than what they say. And with these people and you bringing forth this energy and holding space for us to move forward. You know, that saying like the 100th monkey theory. You know, would we qualify for that as more people understand what's going on and visualize us being there and walking through that time that we shift the whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've already, the reason I say that we've already gone past that choice point is because all we know on the information highway is what the mainstream media tells us. We don't hear the other side of it so much. But the other side of it is so rich, and there's so much awakening happening all over. So, you know, like in the Hopi prophecy, when they talk about the headless path and the path of heart, that choice has been made. There's people all over the world now who have chosen the path with heart, the path with soul, the path of service, the path of discovering their true purpose and living it, of embodying that divinity, of transforming the DNA, of waking up to the full potential, limitless possibility of what it means to be human. It is happening.
I believe that, and I just wanted to know what you had to say. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this, you know, I feel like that's one reason it's so important to disregard the mainstream thought forms. It's like, that's not reality. That's manufactured story. And, you know, the whole COVID crisis would be over in one single day if we all turned off the mainstream story. It's feeding itself only through fear and through an idea of what it means to control. But it's not real. You know, the so-called deep state doesn't have power. Its only power is by convincing people that they're hopeless or inferior. And people are waking up too quickly now. So I think as this continues to happen, the transformation we're looking for will become more and more evident very, very, very quickly. It's like dominoes are already falling. Yeah, Meenakshi?
You know, Kiara, that this is very important what you're saying. I think many of us already, I never know what is the mass media news because I don't read or listen. But what happens is that because we are still needing to, or we are still choosing to use the traditional ways like YouTube and Facebook and all of those, and like you were mentioning, the moment you say something which somebody out there does not want to say, they block you. I've luckily never been blocked, neither has the channel, so maybe I've not been saying enough of the things that need to be said. And that probably is another, not a fear, but sort of like you keep yourself from speaking, you know, the truth. People are and therefore not sharing. Like, just to give an example, if someone has not had the jab, I won't tell someone who has had it, because I don't want them now to be scared because they had it. You know what I mean? So we are really restricting ourselves, and that's probably one of the reasons why this kind of a meeting and is necessary. And secondly, that inner silence, because in that inner silence and in our dreams, we are hearing one another, we are listening to one another, and we are seeing that there are so many of us and what reality really is. That consciousness is there, but it's right now below the surface. uh, but if so, we just have to go there, which we do whenever we have that. And or even this kind of talk, even when we are talking with our mouths right now, I'm just feeling such a beautiful deep sense of that silence, like sorry, like a humming going on in all our hearts. I'm just
Yeah,
feeling that
yeah,
right now. I'm so
yeah.
grateful to what you have brought here, Kiara, and to
Oh, it's such
everyone
a
who's here.
resonance. Yeah, beautiful.
I remember my other question, if you still have a second. Are you ready?
Yes.
We had talked a lot about Mother Earth and how things are affecting her and et cetera and all. I would also like to know your perspective from the Father Sky perspective.
Yeah. So from the Vedic tradition, there's Shiva Shakti, Father Sky, Mother Earth, masculine, feminine. And their understanding is that Shiva is stillness, Shakti is the dance of creation. So the dance can take place only if there's a center of stillness to support it. So to me, it's also the polarity, the dance of creation in this dimension, which is about electrical and magnetic forces. So instead of, Father Sky, Mother Earth, if we substitute electrical forces and magnetic forces, there's a different kind of polarity there. It's not so anthroposophic. As soon as you talk about mother and father, it's like it's a projection of our human ideas. But if we can talk about electrical and magnetic forces, we recognize that our bodies are designed to hold both forces. So part of embodiment is to recognize that we are both. We are Father Sky, we are Mother Earth, and we relate to both directly here and now. So I am not one or the other. I'm not relating to one or the other, and one cannot exist without the other. So Great Spirit, by definition, is the one spirit that moves through all things and is the spirit that is all things. So primordial consciousness, if we define that as that stillness, that Great Spirit, Father Sky, manifests in this beautiful dance of life. That's the goddess, that's Shakti. But one cannot exist without the other. In the Christian tradition, it's like we have come to divide things up too much. And so this whole thing of Father, Mother, God, it's almost like there's two different gods, two different deities. But it's not really about that. Mother includes Father, Father includes Mother, because magnetic and electrical go together in this dimension. So, plasma, from a physics perspective, plasma is the stuff of life. Plasma is 99.999% of matter is plasma. It's ionic, ionized matter. And that then, when it's anchored into a magnetic field is what creates universes and galaxies and planets and life systems. So it's like how electrical forces and magnetic forces interact is the dance of creation. So it's just qualities. So the mother expresses qualities such as beauty, such as diversity, multiplicity, whereas the father is the stillness which anchors the power of the goddess in this dance of creation.
Thank you so much, Kiara. I feel we're coming to a close of the circle. Is everyone feeling complete? Do you want to say something more? Because one thing that I will request everyone after this is to say a word that you are taking away with you from this session. But Kiara, would you want to have the closing word?
Yeah, thank you, Meenakshi, and all of you. I mean, I feel so honored to be part of this circle. And you know, when we talk about Gaia's evolution, we are part of that. We're not separate from her. So we're talking about our inner evolution, our deeper evolution. And we're talking about biological as well as spiritual. We're talking about material as well as mental. So all levels of an awareness. And our journey is about remembering that we are all of it. So I think what's going on now is there's a collective remembering, a collective awakening. And too often we just get kind of identified with the personal. And when I'm only identified with the personal, it's very easy to go into a sense of separation or helplessness or hopelessness or lostness. And so for me, the journey has always been about opening to the big picture, the fullness of evolution, time and space. And then things, you know, the power and the energy, the Shakti can move through. If I'm in a stuck place, it's because my perspective is not wide enough. And so I feel like what we're doing together here is to open up to that big picture perspective, to feed the passion of our inner being, so we can then surrender to that force of life coming through us. And you know what? I'd like to maybe end with something from Rumi, where he says, you know, there's three stages of our evolution. The first is when I'm identified as a drop of water, and the drop is separate from the ocean. It's moving towards the ocean. It's the journey of seeking for the ocean. And then you become one with the ocean, and that's the second stage. You dissolve into the ocean. Your personal identity falls away. It's what many people refer to as enlightenment. But that's only the second stage. And the third stage, and that's where we're going now, is when the ocean enters into the drop. That's the journey of embodiment. The ocean enters the drop. The drop is no longer existing as something separate from the ocean. And then the whole power of the ocean, the fullness of our primordial presence moves through. And you cannot, it's unstoppable. We are unstoppable.
Thank you so much, Kiara. I'm going to request each one to say maybe a word or a sentence of what you're taking away and what you're feeling, what you're taking away from this session. So what I'm taking away, Kiara, is how interrelated we are. Because just yesterday I shared in one of my groups this same Rumi quote, just the quote of it, that you're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in the drop. We are so interlinked with one another. I'm taking away so much happiness and love from this session. Thank you so much. And I'll request each one to say the name of the next person you're passing the torch to. So I'm passing it on to Claudia.
Thank you to everybody. It's been beautiful to be with all of you. And I felt your love. I still feel your love. And I love you so much. Thank you.
And who do you pass it on to? The talking stick?
Vivian?
Thank you, Claudia. My takeaway is that I am just filled with all of the sharing and all the love. And so there's just a deep sense of gratitude to all of you. So thank you, Kiara and Meenakshi, for facilitating, and for all of you. Thank you for allowing me to share this energy with you and sharing your presence and energy with me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
And Vivian, who do you pass the talking torch to?
Sorry, I knew that. I pass this to White Feather.
Thank you. My word is love and community, and I just am so grateful. I've been asked numerous times to join more of the things and that she co-creates, and so I'm glad I came. I'm very glad I came. Thank you for your love and your wisdom that each give, and it'll get me through my week, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Great.
Oh,
Right.
what's it? Tree? Her name? What is? Not Nami Tree.
Tree, your
You're
mic
muted.
is muted still.
Oh, multidimensionality is the word. And I'm still trying to figure out how Kiara can remain so still when he hears so much and sees so much of all of us. And you might share that secret someday. Thank you, Mr. Kiara. And also Meenakshi and everyone here, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Panchami not being able to come on the mic. Okay. But she says, thank you for facilitating this. It was wonderful. Felt connected with all of you. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
everyone.
Well, one word I'll end with. The image that comes up in response to what Name Tree was saying is lightning standing still. You know, there's a power in that image. It's like, imagine this force of lightning, enormous power, but there's a stillness in that also. And it's like, you know, the electrical and magnetic together, the father and the mother dancing together, Shakti and Shiva blended together. That's who we are, lightning standing still. And I just honor each of you so much for bringing yourself present and being here on this earth at this time in support and in honor of this evolution of Gaia, and being the midwives you are in this great awakening. And thank you, Meenakshi, for the wonderful job that you do to make this happen in this way, and all of you.
And Claudia took a picture. Claudia, was it the moon? What were you taking a photo of right now? You're outdoors?
The sunset.
Ah.
Mm.
You have to share it with us somehow.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I'll email you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful
You.
day.
Ciao.
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 Yes, thank you. And I think here your smiles and your laughter help too, I'm sure. I sensed you were smiling at some of the things I was thinking earlier. So thank you.